Hi, so here's my latest video showing how I made these giant concrete planters so that I could grow fruit trees in my small courtyard and so that the roots wouldn't become a problem um, for pipes and underground infrastructure. Dimensions of the pots are roughly 600 millimeters on the outer edge by 550 millimeters on the inner edge and about 5 to 550 high also. The thickness of the pots is 50 millimeters. I did want to make them thinner, but it produced some fails and wasted concrete. And on advice, 40 to 50 millimeters seemed to be what was suggested to me. And of course, those fails led to a lot of wasted concrete that I had to get rid of. So first I had to make this form or mold to pour the concrete into. I did this by making two square boxes with a smaller one fitting inside the larger one. I decided to use proper form ply so I could reuse the form I'd created to make 4 planters and not have to make a new form each time. So the outer box form is 600 millimeters by 600 millimeters. The inner box is 550 by 550 millimeters. All pieces are screwed together. When cutting your form, two edges must be cut to factor in the thickness of the wood. So for the inner box, I cut two pieces at 550 millimeters and two pieces at 510 millimeters because the wood was 20 millimeters thick. This ensures the box will be square, not rectangular. For the larger box, I cut two pieces at 600 millimeters and two pieces at 520 millimeters. This will give me a concrete pot that's 50 millimeters thick. Hopefully this slide demonstrates better what I was trying to say there. With whatever size you use, you just have to do your maths to figure that the boxes will actually be square and not rectangular, depending on the thickness of the wood you use. So in the form, you have to put some wire mesh. I use some thick mesh. It's not chicken wire, but that should work. And some wooden chocks at each corner to stop the form moving while I was filling it with the concrete. The first pot I made, the outer form came off really easy, but the inner form was impossible to remove without cutting it in half. Um, had wanted to keep it to use it again, but it wasn't possible, so I had to destroy it. And it was a rough, awful cut that meant I couldn't use that inner form again. So I thought of a way that would allow me to make an inner form that I could use over and over. And I decided pre-cutting two of the sides and then bracing them with another piece screwed over the top would allow me to have a square form that I could take apart to get out after the concrete had set. And during pouring, I just braced those weak points in the inner form with a 3x2 for extra support, as you can see here. It worked quite well, and I was able to use the inner form to make another 3 concrete pots, and the outer form lasted for all 4 pots. I didn't need to buy any more or make any more forms. As you can see here, the outer form comes off really easy, but getting that inner form off is very difficult. I think this might be the one I had to destroy first up. One thing to point out was with the form ply, it did start to get a little scuffed up after each use, and that could make it a little more likely to stick to the concrete. So all I did was use some vegetable oil to lubricate the outer sides before I poured the concrete in, and then I just washed the concrete down after it had set to get any residue off. So this is my security camera footage of me actually doing the work. I think this might be the last one I made. I thought I'd better snap the footage off the cameras because maybe I might want to make a video about it in the future, which has taken me about almost 2 years to get around to it. I'm moving very slow as I work because a couple of years ago I wasn't as good as I am now and I was just so fatigued. So it was like working at altitude. I did a little bit of work and then I had to stop and pant until I caught my breath. I felt a bit like a sloth trying to work. So I used a concrete mixer to mix. It took about 7.5 to 8 bags of concrete per pot. Yes, it's a lot. 8 20 kilo bags, I think was something like each pot weighed between 140 and 160 kilos, something like that. But moving them into place is another story. So what I'm doing here is I'm just using my hands to stuff the concrete down into the form. Because it's only 50 millimeters thick, I just couldn't pour it. I couldn't shovel it in. It was just the easiest way to do it. But of course, it was very time consuming. So it doesn't show it in this footage, but every so often you have to get a piece of wood or some kind of tool to tamp the concrete down right to the bottom. And you have to make sure that you are getting the concrete on either side of your reinforcing mesh so that you keep that mesh nice and in the middle of the concrete. So it's going to hold it together the best. After I finished putting all the concrete into the mold, I let it rest for a minute, cleaned up the concrete mixer and some other things, and then I came back and just started hammering the sides of the form with a rubber hammer. This was so any air bubbles trapped deeper within would come to the surface. And this took a while because as I hammered, just so many air bubbles kept coming up and up. And taking the time to do this, however, meant there was less work for me to do after I had finished. With the pots, you always get some little bubbles and little holes. And if they're really bad, I just made a little mortar mix and filled them in after the concrete had set. Or you can use this outdoor putty. That's pretty good as well to do these really small, fine holes. It depends how worried you are about it. I filled some of them up and left others and painted it white. Still looks good. And then I used my hands to just fill in any parts where the concrete had sort of dropped down and needed a bit more filling. And then I used a metal float to smooth down the top around all of the edges. I'm probably a bit pedantic making sure it was all perfectly smooth, but any edge you leave in the concrete will dry hard. And it's just easier to do it right before it sets. So as I said, the final weight of these pots was between 140 and 160 kilograms. I wish I'd had someone to help me move them in place, but I just didn't. So I had to figure out a way to do it myself, and the way I came up with was getting an iron bar, a really long one, finding a way to wedge it underneath the pot, and then levering it up until I could put some wedges underneath it, and then eventually lever it onto these two dollies I've got here. It was quite tricky. I pretty much had to be on the end of the bar and kick a wedge underneath so that my weight could actually lift them. And then I just put down some boards and dollied it into place in the corner of the garden. So when I was casting these, I didn't put a bottom in the pots because I thought it just might be too hard. So what I did do is once I put them in place, then I cemented in a bottom so that the pot would be self-contained and the roots couldn't get down through to the soil. In hindsight, it probably wouldn't have mattered. Perhaps letting the roots get down a little bit wouldn't have been such a bad thing. There's a gardener on YouTube, Bunny Guinness, I think, and she's got a video about how letting the roots go through the bottom of a pot is not always a bad thing. Just got a little distracted there with my cat. He was falling off the chair. So there's my idea and my little DIY project with concreting. So I hope you find this video interesting, and if you want to have a go at the same, I hope this helps. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.